It knows no bounds now. Uh, I believe that regardless of where you're from, the same level of policing is expected. And most chiefs of police understand that without community support, they won't be there long. That's my opinion.
How do you create a brighter future? A more just and equal world? We start with understanding the issues, exploring solutions, and diving into deep conversations. Welcome to the Conversation Space with Equal Justice Now, a show that examines the issue of police reform, the criminal justice system, and preserving the right to vote for all Americans. Join us as we sit down to listen and learn from thought leaders, advocates, and those on the front lines of expanding equality. We welcome you as we explore the world that could be.
How's it going? My name's Thomas Lucas, and this is another amazing episode of the Equal Justice Now podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest, as usual. His name is Jerry Rodriguez. We're going to learn a whole lot about what he's done and has going on today. And Jerry, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Thomas. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Equal Justice Now is for sure appreciative of you taking your time to have this conversation with us. Can you tell the audience a little bit about where you come from? Where'd you start? How'd you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. Well, I am the product of an LA Unified School District, very proud of it. I grew up in Southeast County of Los Angeles. I went to LA schools, graduated from high school, Bell High. At the time, it was mostly Hispanic, but it was definitely growing. And we migrated to this country in 1969. I was actually born in Cuba, came to this country as political refugees, like most folks did at that time, with really nothing but the shirts on our back, literally and figuratively. I came here at the age of 6, went to school, started with the LAPD in 1986, put myself through college, got a bachelor's and a master's while working. Was fortunate enough to retire from the LAPD as a captain, where I met Eric Kowalczyk in Baltimore later as a deputy police commissioner. And that really, the last 4 or 5 years of my 35-year law enforcement career allowed me to move around. From there, I went to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, and I was the chief of investigations. And then from there, I worked at San Luis Obispo, doing special investigations and running their programs there.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm like stoked to even be talking to you today. And
I'm humble. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, for sure. To give the masses an opportunity to really, you know, get into the mind of someone like yourself who's kind of seen it all and done it all in regards to law enforcement. Where do you see the profession today?
I started in 1986. I had an affinity for this profession ever since a young boy. I started my uh, eventual dive into law enforcement as a cadet, an explorer cadet, I think they were called back then. So really, this career that I chose has shaped who I am today in more ways than one. During that time, and that's why I wanted to really pause before I answered the question, because um, I think the changes, certainly from when I started to now, have been immense. And I think we're still changing. I think we are at a very pivotal moment now where I think we have all seen that the community's education about what to expect, what they should be getting from law enforcement has grown. Communities, uh, all communities, especially communities of color, they're very well versed now as to what they can expect from their law enforcement, who we work for our communities. Uh, when I first started, there was a lot of talk about depending from where you were living, depended on the type of police service you would get. And, I didn't see it too much from those eyes. Do I believe that it happened? Of course. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. But I could tell you that from day one, um, I've strived, and those that worked for me have strived to provide the quality of service to the people that we come across, the same that we would appreciate our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our wives to get if they were to call 911. So I think we're in a spot right now where we have look, to be blunt, it's not the most popular profession, and we see it in law enforcement because and it's a number of factors. When the economy is good, hiring is bad, but also right now I think that most people that are on the job, if they could, they would retire and don't feel a sense of community in some areas, connection with the communities that they felt in the past. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think overall there is a lot of support, but if you allow some portions of the news media to drive your thinking, I think you get this really glim, picture. I've worked in Baltimore, as did Eric, where the community is under tremendous challenges, but they love their police department. They welcome us, but they work and live under some difficult challenges. So it's really up to us in law enforcement to work through that and try to connect and provide them with a service that they deserve and that we as professionals should aspire to provide them. So in short, we're in a very transitional phase. We're trying to find, I believe, our footing in today's America, where I think diversity has really, it knows no bounds now. Uh, I believe that regardless of where you're from, the same level of policing is expected. And most chiefs of police understand that without community support, they won't be there long. That's my opinion.
I respect that so much. You're definitely a they say bad cop, good cop. You're definitely the good cop, and I truly do believe Equal Justice Now truly believes that there are way more good cops than bad. And you spoke on presence of media and how media has a part in how your profession is looked at by the communities. And you know I wish I could slap media on the wrist because I don't like the part that they play. I do truly believe that there are a bunch of yous out there and a few bad apples, just like any other profession. So definitely agree with what you're saying there. You speak from a strong stance on ethics and accountability and trust when it comes to the community. You know, you would say that I guess you would say that's extremely important, right?
Absolutely. Let me say this, Thomas, with regards to ethics. You know, the badge and the patches on you say who you represent as an agency, but your name tag says who you represent as your upbringing, as who got you here, your parents, your legacy. And to me, both are equally important. And I wouldn't compromise one for the other, regardless of which way. I do a lot of teaching now in investigations. And one of the things that I think is paramount is not compromising our investigative integrity. And you must let the chips fall where they may. In order to do that, you have to go wherever the evidence takes you. And I firmly believe that as a chief, if we did well, you say it. If we did not so well, you have to stand behind that as well and be able to stand in front of the public and say that. And I think we as a profession have not always been that good at doing that.
When it comes to that, you've been in the game a long time. I'm sure you've been involved with incidents where there may be some rogue officers involved and not handling themselves the right way. Why does it seem to the public, at least, like it's just hard to hold those guys accountable in those moments and after?
I honestly believe that most of the departments are run by leaders that believe in accountability, strive for accountability, seek to uh, lead by example. What happens is that when you get into it, there's so many pressures from rank and file. The best way I could describe it, and there's a lot of factors, in my opinion, you have to balance morale and supporting your troops because morale, supporting the troops equals productivity and equals the job getting done with being responsive and accountable to the community, the elected officials. Um, Whenever one of those becomes lopsided or overpowers the other, I think you lose your footing. So I believe policing is a triangle where there's 3 points that you must maintain integrity to: the department, the community we serve, uh, and to the elected officials. The people that put you there, the community, the city, what it is that we do. So there's the department, and I'm sorry, the rank and file, and the community and the elected officials. If you are too far one side for the officers or just for the department, uh, or just for the community, you're going to lose balance. You're going to lose face one way or another. And I have personally seen some of my mentors really struggle with trying to hold their officers accountable while not seeming like they are throwing them under the proverbial bus, but being responsive to the communities. And it is difficult. But I think most of us know in our gut, and Eric and I have been there, certainly in my Baltimore days, we have seen when incidents, because of their publicity, because of the media attention, because of the magnitude of the incident, whether a life was lost, huge property damage, you can't handle those incidents the same as you would any other run of the mill use of force or discourtesy complaint. And it requires the department head to stand out there, in my opinion, and be the face of this incident, talk about what we did, talk about what the community can expect, talk about what the officers can expect out of this. And really, there's one way to go, and that's wherever the evidence takes you. And if at the end of the day, the evidence shows with a preponderance of evidence, which is 50% plus a feather, if you will, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, like in court, it's a preponderance of evidence that there was misconduct, then you need to take action, and it needs to be swift, because the purpose of misconduct is not just to correct the wrong that was done, but it's also to set the tone and the standard for those other officers that are watching, that see what you condone and what people can get away with. Because it's my belief that whatever you condone, you're allowing. If you look the other way, if you don't take immediate action, and there's the other flip side of that as well, is that you could expect what you inspect. If you're looking for and maintaining and holding the line at accountability, community policing, constitutional policing, which I got to tell you, early on in my career, I didn't really understand how important the Constitution and policing is. Go ahead, Thomas.
No, I wasn't raising my hand. Keep
Oh,
going.
yeah. So, I mean, if we look at how the Constitution fits into what we do every day, we need to study and be a part of that, drilling it into us in the academy. Because for us to uphold the Constitution means that we can then provide constitutional policing that is fair, unbiased throughout the land, regardless of what the makeup of our community looks like. That's certainly what I strive to do. Now, I'm not going to lie here and tell you I've been perfect. I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot. I've certainly tried to do the very best I can. And I think there is a domino effect. There's a euphoria. There's an energy that, I have seen with my officers when you're leading with the right foot forward. You're doing the right things for the right reasons, with the understanding that your goal is to provide constitutional policing. Um, People will follow you. They understand that you will reward those that do the right things for the right reasons and hold accountable those that fall short. Now, if you fall short because it's a mistake of the heart, we can correct that. Do it once. We can train you. If there's discipline, there's discipline. Now, if you willfully disobey policy, procedure, or do something criminal, we will hold you accountable as well. And that's the true meaning of, in my opinion, the disciplinary system. It's not just to hold our officers accountable, but also to dissuade others from doing it who see the effects of doing something wrong.
1000%. You're speaking so heavily on accountability, and that's like Equal Justice Now's favorite word. And, when a criminal does, he breaks the law, we want to hold him accountable. When an officer breaks the law, we want to hold them accountable. Accountability is, that line that really keeps, we believe, society together and moving in the right direction. And
Absolutely.
when we lose accountability, it's when things go crazy and we spin out of control. And we all know the world today is already feeling like it's spinning out of control. And so the last thing we need is to have a worse relationship moving forward between the community and the police who are there to protect and serve. And I remember growing up, and there was a point in my life, in my early stages, where I thought I wanted to be a police officer. And through experiences growing up in New York City, and stop and frisk and things like that, many different experiences, I found myself saying, no, that's not what I want to do. And so i guess I would say, I wish, well, I don't have to wish, we do an Equal Justice Now podcast with beautiful souls like yourself who express from a law enforcement standpoint exactly the things that could strengthen the relationship between the community and law enforcement. So, I really appreciate you speaking in this way and being open about the accountability factor, because it's exactly what we hope for in conversation about policing, police reform, and just, their relationship in general.
I
Go
I
ahead.
must say this about accountability, and sometimes it's frustrating to us also as law enforcement leadership, because sometimes we want to get to the final justice when we know where it's going to end. One of the things that I find frustrating is when there is police misconduct that is evident, and it may even have criminal misconduct component to it. Yet we are bound by so many employee laws and police officer bill of rights laws. In some states are very tough. Maryland is one of them. California is another one. Some states it's a right to work and there isn't that. But there's certain things you have to do before you get to that end conclusion. And I know to the community sometimes it seems an unwillingness to take action, when in reality it may seem that it's a slow moving process, and it sometimes is. If I was able to educate the community, and not in all departments, because I got to tell you, Thomas, I've seen it. I know, I know far too well what happens sometimes, and how things are done in order to protect officers. But for the most part, when an officer commits a crime, I think, um, and we're seeing it a lot. In fact, I think some of the district attorneys nowadays are more willing to do those tough jobs than ever before. I've been a part of it, but there's certain political protections that need to be followed. It takes time, and sometimes I wish the community would understand and follow through. And one of the things I would ask for time. Allow us the time to investigate. Let us gather the evidence and be able to come to the conclusion. I will answer those questions. And I used to like to say, because it was very true, like you, we have more questions right now than answers. Allow us to get those answers and we'll come back to you. And that takes time sometimes. In LAPD, where I worked, for example, a shooting investigation used to take, because of volumes of work and other things, 8, 9 months before it could be concluded. And that's a long time. And I understand why the community would get frustrated. But as hard as they try to work to resolve that time that it takes a little while. And it takes education on both sides. And we need to get in front of it early on, though, and not expect that the community will be able to wait without any answers. We need to really work in true partnership. Everybody says partnership and transparency, but our actions have to match our words.
So, another question for you. Do you see the tragic death of George Floyd as a watershed moment in law enforcement, or a temporary blip before returning to business as usual? With respect.
That's a great question. I have lived through several to use your words, watershed moments. And it's my experience from having lived inside the agencies, or let's just call it policing, for 35 years. At least the agencies that I've been at, there's never been a back to normal. Now, maybe the forward facing image didn't appear to change, but internally things have changed. From that perspective, I want to believe in my core that things will not, cannot go back to normal. What that normal is may be different for you and I. And I have to tell you, and I have yet to meet a police officer, an executive, a director, anybody that has told me that 9 minutes of standing on a suspect's neck or listening to anyone say they can't breathe is acceptable. So it is not acceptable. I'm a use of force expert. Uh, that was troubling, very troubling. I don't know enough about it. I don't know about the department. I certainly don't want to think that anything after that would go back to normal. I do believe, though, that there's a lot of changes. There's 18,000 police departments within the nation, 18,000, each with their own policies, procedures, their own training. So as we start to move this behemoth, 18,000 agency into similar training, expectations, performance, I think we're going to get better. I hate to, I refuse to think that we'll go back to it. And I understand what you're saying. And, I'm not naive enough to believe that maybe some departments in this 18,000 department agency maybe never changed anything. I certainly would like to think that a lot of folks, all of the chief executives have looked at that incident and all the other ones that we've had several that really require us to look internally at our policies, at our training, at the culture, because you have to look at the culture too. Why wasn't someone else able to say, hey, get off of that? I don't care if you have 1 day or 100 days on the job or 1,000 years on the job, you should be able to do it. I know what happens. I understand the seniority and the apprehension of new folks, but we need to have an environment where everybody can stand up and correct what they see as wrong. And I hope to God that other people thought that that was wrong. Regardless of what the person has done up to that point, you have to make sure that it's just like when you pull the trigger, regardless of what happened up to that point, what caused you to pull that trigger as a police officer, you're responsible every time you pull that trigger. You're responsible and accountable for that round once it leaves your gun. And whenever you take police action, you're responsible for it. And you need to be able to stand up and explain why. And as a reasonable officer that would take the same actions. And I don't know of anybody that would have taken that action the same way. So I want to believe in my heart, and maybe I want to believe in my heart that we have changed. We will change. We've changed, since the Rodney King incident. I know incidents. We've had smaller incidents in agencies in Baltimore and LAPD that internally we implemented training and different tactics. The problem is that just when you think things can't go sideways, they do. And I think accountability, doing the right things, making sure that we stop injustice or wrongdoing, and I mean one officer for the other, it's something that needs to be reminded. Every officer needs to be reminded, just like we have monthly qualifications or bi-monthly qualifications. You need to preach that all the time. We need to be able to talk about constitutional policing, doing the right things, quite honestly, and what it means if you don't, and what happens if you don't.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. A lot of what you're speaking on, needs to be heard. And I started off this conversation kind of saying, I used to want to be a police officer. And so, during these times, departments all over the country are having, a hard time with recruitment and, retention rates. And so I guess I guess what do you think? What do you think needs to happen to outside of the accountability realm? What do you think needs to happen to fix that aspect for us to get back to a place where you know young people want to see that as a profession of choice? They want to get out there and smile every day and know that they're protecting their communities. I know we've really dived into the accountability aspect. Would you say there's anything else that could be done between the two parties, the community and police, to help with that aspect, getting more police in the doors?
Well, Thomas, that is such that question is so one. It's a great question, but it is so complex. It is so deep and so difficult to. We could debate, talk, discuss because there's so many layers. I mean, if I was to just slice that pie from the police standpoint, yes, there's a lot we can do. Every contact that every police officer makes every day, whether it's holding the door open for someone that's walking into a business behind you, whether it's smiling to someone, whether it's explaining something as simple as a neighbor asking, "What are you doing here, officer? Am I safe?" In the old days, it was, "Ma'am, police, go back inside. Can't tell you. It's too important." Well, hogwash. People want to know. People need to know that we're not robots. We're not devoid of emotion. We need to be able to say, "Ma'am, we're here because your neighbor or a person called for X, Y, and Z. Everything is safe. You're okay. We're going to make sure everything is good. We're going to whatever it is you need to tell them, but we need to interact." So we need to take that time, and it's really the basis of community policing. So from the police standpoint, we need to look at everyday contact with the communities we serve, make sure that we take the time to interact. Sometimes folks have interaction that consists solely of a traffic ticket, and that's the only impression they take of a police officer. And that's unpleasant to begin with. And I got to believe I've seen, 99% of the officers do a great job. There always is that one, but that one time that is shown out in public or gets media attention has an immense impact on communities at large. So, yes, we as an organization, as a profession, need to do more. I think we're getting there. I think it's no longer, and it hasn't been for a long time, seen as a blue collar. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's a highly skilled profession now. Individuals hold multiple, such as yourself, which I was uh, very proud of you when I saw what you did, and multiple degrees. A lot of my colleagues have that, and they've worked very hard to be educated and to be able to bring a certain level of sophistication to this profession. So the days of just individuals that are police officers because that's all they could get or they left the military, I think it's very skilled now. But it needs to translate into how we interact, but then also how we socialize our young officers to come into the community and not be afraid to talk to the community members, to go in and meet them. And a lot is being done. Um, but I also fear that when you publicize attacks on police officers, there's a certain, it's like taking steps back for every step forward that we've taken. Does that
Are
make
you
sense?
speaking in regards to, like, quote unquote, defund the police?
Not just defund the police. I haven't even touched on that. That brings other problems, and that was part of. I'm talking about showing police officers getting ambushed, police officers getting shot. There's a lot of video out there because everybody has a video nowadays, and that hardens a person's position as far as us against them. And one of the hardest things for a young police officer to do, to learn, is to understand when to be on guard and when to, if possible, drop that guard. And you can't be militarized the entire time, looking over your shoulder and being ready to draw. You need to be able to relax and talk to people from the heart, be honest, and connect with them on a personal level. And if you're constantly at a heightened awareness where you believe that harm is being brought to you, you're not going to be able to do that, make that connection. You won't be able to talk to people freely. That's what I'm talking about. Not even really the defund. So I think that has damaged our profession. But I think socially also what happens in our homes, how our kids are brought up, um, and that's throughout generations, for several generations. So there's so many factors. There's some young police officers that work in diverse communities that grew up, went to school, and never were exposed to a diverse community, and they experience culture shock when they go in there. And I think we need to address that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Equal Justice Now, we know that, it's literally like 98% good cops out there, and so yeah, the media and the videos and, you know, I would like to see the communities holding themselves a little bit more accountable. When you see an officer doing something good, or,
Absolutely. And a
helping a
lot of them
little
do.
girl out. Yeah, when
A
you
lot of
see,
them do.
yeah, when the police officer pulls you over for doing 15 over the speed limit and he lets you go without a ticket and just a warning, pull your camera phone out. Pull your camera phone out and record that moment too, because that is your moment, that is your experience, and you should share that experience. And I think that we all have to have some skin in the game, and we can't just blame law enforcement for all of where we're at right now. I think all of these aspects play a key role in where we're at right now. And, speaking on where we're at right now, let's fast forward 10 years. Where do you see law enforcement 10 years from now?
Another great question. And I know I'm not surprised that you're asking great questions. I'm going to tell you first where I hope I see law enforcement in the future. I hope 40, 50 years from now, we see an even greater diversity in policing where we have developed systems where we can neutralize, for lack of a better word, a situation without resorting to lethal weapon, right? I think that's a big thing. If we had more research and development and coming, and there's no money in it really because most city budgets can't develop it. But I have to think that there has to be weapons out there, devices out there that can neutralize a situation where we don't have to resort to lethal force. I think that is huge. That's a big problem. Um, Uses of force by police officers are the single most litigious and damaging event that police officers have. Having said that, I hope to have a more educated force with better tools, uh, better ability to be able to respond to the diverse problems within our communities. I hope to have police departments that are truly transparent, that can connect and have worked after these watershed moments to develop and strengthen the bridges with the communities, um, and be able to have true partnerships, where we used to see that a little bit in the small beat town. You used to see in the old movies where the beat cop would know everybody in the community and would know little Johnny or little Mary or whoever it was, and be able to take them home if they were mischievous and not necessarily arrest. As corny as that sounds, we have lost that connection, that being a piece or a part of that fabric of that community. My fear 40 to 50 years from now is that there will be specialized or security type police departments out there serving different communities, and maybe getting away from the centralized police departments. And I'm afraid because I don't know what that looks like. I don't know who they're beholden to. Um, I don't believe police departments should be beholden to. Uh, Look, and I say this because of my research into the 20s and 30s, how corruption came into play in police departments. We cannot allow corruption and special interest with, for monetary gains or whatever. You need to be able to hold them accountable to do the right things. And that's who they should be holden to, is doing the right things for the right reasons, but not necessarily this organization or corporation. I hope that makes sense.
No, 1000% makes sense. And I think, for the people out there who, it may take maybe a few playbacks for them to really pick up on what you're speaking on right now, I think they'll truly appreciate it. And I know we're running up on time here. You have a super busy schedule, but we appreciate all of this so much because we get to put this footage back out and give people the opportunity to get thought process and understanding from an officer, a long-standing officer, a respectable officer, that otherwise they may not have ever gotten. And who's to say that that person didn't have a bad experience with an officer
Absolutely.
or whatever the case, and now they're painting the entire law enforcement community in that light. And so this is why we do the Equal Justice Now podcast. I know we kind of touched on it a second and glazed over it, but we don't agree with defund the police. That's counterproductive. If anything, we need to maybe reallocate funds in the thought process of or add funds in the thought process of training and cultural understanding and many other different aspects. But I think that we all have to, as Americans, as long as we're calling ourselves Americans, understand that we have to hold ourselves accountable and we can't, choose the easy route and yell defund the police, choose the easy route and yell get rid of the police. I mean, you're getting robbed, you want to call the police. I mean, that's just the reality. Your grandmom's getting robbed or whatever is happening, you want to call the police. You want to call the police just like you want to call the ambulance to come and get you if you're having a hard or
Absolutely.
so I just think we have to be more realistic in this time as communities and also more accountable as communities. And so you know so Jerry, we appreciate you so much for taking this time and being who you are and exposing who you are for the world to see. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure the masses sees this video because you are who police are today. And I think the bad apples get too much light. And so, yeah, you're the 99%. And we have to stop shedding light on all of the bad situations and give you some light so that we can have a different perspective from the community. And if there is nothing else you have in mind, I'm going to let you go today. And we truly do appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. I want to leave you with this. One of the things that I think in policing has been very challenging is just realizing that we need to take time to learn each other. Police officers throughout the nation work in some very challenging environments, but we police and we sometimes don't understand the challenges that the community members have in order to live where they live. And if they did, if they'd appreciate, I saw this in Baltimore, great people living under some very difficult conditions that weren't allowed to show support or really be seen talking to the police, but it didn't mean that they didn't appreciate it. And it's when you spoke to them in private that you really got that sense. And I strive and I wish, and I'm very proud of my profession because I believe 99% of the officers are working very diligently to provide the highest quality service. But there's also a lot of pressure out there for the communities and that maybe don't allow them to interact with us as much as they should. And I hope that changes. And I know that from an executive standpoint, we try to get our officers to learn the community, understand the community, and get in there and talk to them. So I hope that changes. I appreciate you so very much. I really like what I'm hearing. I've liked what I've read, and I am honored to have been at least a little part of this.
Jerry Rodriguez, ladies and gentlemen, will have our editing team throw in a crazy applaud and drum set on this aspect here of the show. And, you're appreciative, we're appreciative, and we'd love to do it again, maybe in a few months to talk about current events or whatever the case. But we love you
Thank
and
you, sir.
stay safe out there.